All right, so let's start creating UVs for this little creature here. Okay, I'm just gonna hit F on the keyboard to frame it so that I can rotate around it better. So I can see here that the UVs are basic for this one. So I will just start by creating a fresh set of UVs from my create portion of the UV toolkit. How about that? That's the first step. I should always check to see if the transformation and the history are deleted on this, which I can see that it is correct. The texture borders are highlighted and my checker map is also turned on, and I also dimmed down the checker icon so I can actually see my shells a little bit better. You need to just turn this thing on and then dim it down. Okay, just like that. All right, we are ready to go. Let's start with the complicated shapes. Okay, so the first step is to project an image of the geometry from the 3D space into the UV space. And we will do that by going to the Create menu. And for this one, instead of planar, I'm just going to start by getting a camera-based projection. Basically, it's as if I'm taking a picture of this object in the 3D space and then put that image into the UV space, okay? Just going to close these other elements of the UV toolkit so it's less confusing. All right, so let's just start. Select the object. I am not going to select faces because I want to do the whole object this time. And then I'm going to go to camera based. Voila, now I can see my UVs. All right. So as you can see, the direction that you project the UV is very good. Like all the rest is a little bit like skewed, like at this parts and these parts. So we need to make some cuts to fix that. Okay. So step 2, cut. All right. So I'm thinking, well, of course, these two sweet top and bottom part are making good separate shells. So I'm just going to start with those and I will cut both of them. You can do these cuts at once, or you can just, cut them at a time. But just remember that you should always select some edges before you hit cut, or it will cut all the edges of the object. So at this point, I'm selecting these two edge loops, and then I will go to my cut and sew and click on cut. Okay. And now if I go to my UV shells, I can just, separate those shells. Okay, I'm done cutting those. Yay! All right, so let's see what are the other cuts that I need to make. So in order to make this object lay flat, you can see that there are so many like curvatures in here, and it's a rather complicated shape. So we must do more cuts to this shell. Let's see. I am in the shell mode, so I'm just going to go to my edge mode, and I'm looking at here, and I'm thinking maybe if I select also this portion of the geometry, like this part, that's the most complicated part maybe, then I can kind of tend to it as a separate shell, okay? So I'm gonna make these two selection of edge loops here, and I will do another cut, okay? Cut, and then I will go to my shell. Now I can see that I have these two separate shells as well. Okay, so this is this shell. Okay, if I go to shell, shell, and then this shell. Okay, and then I have this one. All right. So, all right, let's see how many cuts do we need to unfold this one correctly. Well, I can think of so many different ways to unfold this, and that's the beauty and the hard part of viewing, that you can unfold it in so many different ways. You should always aim for creating less amount of shells, less number of shells. You don't want to, for example, um, unfold each of these faces separately. You also need to consider what kind of texture you want to apply to this shape, and that will help you decide where to place the seams and where to put the cuts. Um, So I'm thinking, let's see, with this one, because these are practice like UVs, right? We don't have like any plans on putting some textures on them, but I'm thinking to just keep things nice and clean. I can see that if I look at this object from the top view, this portion is flat. So any part of the geometry that is flat, that's great, because then if you make the correct cuts, you can just lay it flat, okay? So what I'm going to do is that I'm first going to start by separating that bottom part of this part of the geometry from the top part. So maybe something like this. Okay, all these edges, and then I will cut that. You see that it's getting highlighted here, and I can go to my shell and then separate that shell. Okay. And then with the top part, I still need some more cuts to make it flat, because you can see it's now like a box, right? This is like a box, right? And if I say unfold, it's as if I'm pushing a press on top of it without making the correct cuts, and then it's not gonna unwrap nicely. I will see some skewing happening, like stretches happening in here, all right? But I'm thinking I can, at this point, maybe I can decide about like, cutting this whole section just like that, right? Okay, so to separate the top part from this part. But I think like if I want to look at this shape from this view, then it would be too much seams, and then maybe painting the texture so that it looks as a continuous texture between these two parts of the geometry is going to be tough. So what I'm going to do, instead of cutting the whole edge loop around it, I will only cut maybe this one and then this one. Okay, so these two cuts. Let's see how it will unfold doing that. Well, I'm also thinking maybe these two. Okay, yeah, that should do it. Okay, so I'm just going to cut those as well. And at this point, let's just start unfolding some of these shells. I'm going to select this shell, go to my unfold option and do unfold. Okay, not too bad. So you see that it is not horrible, but I see some stretching happening in here, right? Like in here, because these edges are all connected, and it kind of prevents this from creating like a not stretched texture. I'm just looking around and I see a little bit of like, eesh, it's a little bit icky. So what I'm gonna do is that maybe, let's see, did I not cut this edge? Oh, I guess it didn't cut. Okay, let's see. UVs. Oh, it is cut. Well, it just doesn't do a nice job of unfolding it, I think. And you know what? This is the part that I definitely wanted to be in the demo, that you just need to evaluate, decide, and then redo some parts. Okay. Maybe at the end I decide, okay, it doesn't worth the trouble. Let's just have this as separate parts, right? But I just want to give it one more try and maybe do a little bit of, it's kind of like making a box, right? You see that? Like I'm just gonna make some cuts in here, just like that, cut them, and let's just unfold that shell again. Unfold, unfold. Okay, so much, much nicer now. So I made a few cuts and now I don't see the stretching happening, right? So I'm gonna call this a success. There's a little bit of stretching happening like around here, but I think that's fine. Um, for example, if you want to, it all depends to the texture that you want to apply. If the texture that you're applying is like a text or something that it definitely needs to be perfectly like straight up, maybe you need to just, separate all these edges and, cut through them. Okay, you're like, okay, it doesn't work like this. I need to cut those, right? So I'm just going to make that cut, right? So now the shell is totally separated. So if I go to the shell, this is a separate shell, and all those things are, a separate shell now, but that's fine. I can always sew them back together or maybe do another projection for just those faces. But let's just unfold this one. So this is now very nice and circular, and you don't see any sort of stretching happening on the top part. So it all depends what you want to do and if a little bit of stretching is acceptable or not. So what should we do with this? Okay, what should we do with that? Maybe the easiest way would be to select those faces or shells and then do another projection. Cut and sew would also work, but this is just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We can sew them back together, or we can do another projection. It's totally up to you. You know what? Let's just sew them back. Why not? So I will go to, do I need to go to edge mode? Nope, I don't think so. Okay, collect, collect. It's nice and beautiful. Do it with the sound effect so it's more fun. And as I mentioned this before, you can always hold down B to just change the range of sewing, okay? And at this point, don't leave it the way that it is. You still need to unfold it. You just sew it back together. So you need to click it and hit unfold, and then it becomes like this. It's a ring now, right? All right, how about this one? Let's just unfold this one. Unfold, and I'm just going to click on it and check it out here. It's absolutely fine. And then how about this one? This is not done yet. You see that there are stretching happening, right? So we need to unfold those two parts as well. Unfold, unfold. Okay, nice and sweet. All right. How about this one? Unfold. Well, oh, what's happening? Oh, we forgot to cut that, right? So don't worry about it. One way to fix that would be to go to edge mode, select an edge, and at this point I'm deciding where's the, like, the part that I want to hide all the seams. I'm going to go with this one, okay? And then I will cut that, select the shell, and unfold again. Voila, nice and beautiful. It's only rotated, but that's fine. When I do the layout, it will take care of it. How about this one? Let's cut that also. And I'm gonna choose the same edge that I chose, like the continuous of that edge, because I wanna hide the seams for this object at one side of it, okay? I will select that, hit cut, go to UV shell, and unfold. All right, so everything is unfolded now, nice and beautiful. There's one other thing left to do, and that's to lay them out into the 0, 1 space. And I will go to my arrange and layout. And then I will click on the layout. I've already set up all my options here based on the document, so I should be all good to go. I hit layout, and everything is laid out nice and clean here, and the proportions are correct, okay? So at this point, if I want to scale anything, I will select everything and scale them to don't mess up the scale that the texture has. And it's, you see that all the squares are appearing the same size overall, all the shells, and that's exactly what we want. So we're going to scale them all together at this point. And from this point, you can just, decide about rotating them individually. That's fine. It's only the scale that you need to do all of them together. Um, and then kind of having them nice and clean, and maybe the texture at this point you're thinking about what are the textures that you want to draw on them, and maybe keeping the um, shapes that are going to have the same texture kind of close to each other. And at this point, you also can decide about if you want to have textures that are overlapped. So let's say for the textures, I want these two parts of the geometry to have the exact same texture. If I want that, that's fine. I can select these two shells and stack them. You see now these two are stacked on top of each other. So I can just draw something here and it will appear on both these geometries. All right. So here is something that you should know. You should never have overlaps in your UVs unless there's a situation like this, right? There's a scenario that you want a texture on both of these geometries, and those geometries, they look exactly the same. So you can just, select those shells and stack them or unstack them like this, right? But when you want to move them, now you need to drag and select them. But if you have a UV layout that is like this, that is a big no-no, because then these two parts of these geometries, they're going to share the texture, and we don't want that. So you should not do that unless it is like intentional, like the way that I did it here. Okay. So the way that you cut your UVs and lay them out is going to be different from what you see here, and that's absolutely fine. But the things that you need to consider is this. You need to go for minimal shells. So having, all those edges cut is a no-no. The other thing is the UVs should be laid out in the 0 to 1 space. And the first and the most important thing that you should check is your um, checker map so that it appears like squares and it is not stretched or squashed, and making sure that they all are lined up just like that. No overlapping. What else? The seams are at the right spots, so not too many seams. Yeah, that's all. And if you see any errors at any part, like if you lay them out and you're like, oh shoot, I forgot to UV this part, you don't start over with the whole object. You can always select that shell and then do the projection one more time, and kind of go from there. Okay. So let's say that I forgot to UVs for this part, or for some reason I found out that this UV isn't working and I just want to create some UVs for that. So I will select that shell, and maybe the easiest way to get a UV for that would be to do the planer. Just gonna shift click on it. So bring the option on and down the y-axis. So I'm looking at it from the top, hit apply, okay? And now I have a perfect UV for that. I don't need to make any cuts or scale it or unfold it, because this surface is laid flat and I looked at it from exactly at the top, so it should work. But how about the proportions of the squares? How about those? Well, one way would be for you to just use this one and try to eyeball the scale for that. The other way is that you can go to which part is it? To transform. Okay. There's something called textile density, and this ensures that all the shells, they show up with the correct proportions. So what you can do is that you can select on any of those shells that already exist and you know that the textile density for them is correct, like the proportions of those squares. You select, for example, on this one and hit get. Okay, and then it will get the textile density of this shell, and then you're going to click on your new shell. Okay, I'm just going to scale it up so that you see what it does. You're going to select your new shell, and with this one, you're going to hit set. Okay, and as you do that, it will get the textile density from the other shell and then apply it to this one. So now they both have the same scale textile density. Okay, so they will show correct proportions. And if you wanted to stack them on top of each other, you can do that by going to stack similar. It's under arrange and layout, stack similar, and then it will stack the similar UVs on top of each other. Okay. All right, that's it for this complicated geometry. If you completed this part of the demo, you should just go and buy yourself some ice creams or coffee or whatever. Give yourself a good prize, because this is very tricky. So I hope it's a desired challenge for all of you.